People who have escaped the purgatory of the 9 to 5, how'd you do it? I asked my boss if I could work from 7 to 5, 4 days a week, and he said yes. So now I have a 3-day weekend every weekend. Not only that, but I work Sunday Wednesday, so my Monday is hassle-free without everyone looking over my shoulder. I just come in and get my projects done without any interference. I'm also getting so many of the home improvement projects done that I wanted to get done now, and I'm enjoying life much more. Nice boss TBH. Smart boss too. Be cunt to your employee, expect them to be a cunt back to you. Give them flexibility, they'll be productive. True enough. Some employees just suck and aren't happy with anything. That said, those people make you really appreciate the good ones. I currently work 2 days a week, 16 hours days, hospital, and I can never go back to 9 to 5. Only negative aspect, those days are set son, but whatever, I only work 8 days a month, I'll take it. Hi, I'm a nursing student. Do you get paid for full time, or would you have to work another shift for that? No, it's considered full time at 32 hours a week. I do have the option of picking up the extra 8 hours, I rarely do unless I'm needed. Can you explain to a layperson why 16 to 24-hour shifts are so common in medicine? It feels like a recipe for mistakes and poor bedside manner due to exhaustion. It's justified by the idea that longer shifts prevent certain risks that are increased by the miscommunication from switching doctors/nurses who are familiar with the patient case. I think in theory that was the idea, and then studies showed there was no difference, but we still stuck with the long shifts and call. I work a job where there's no set hours and we can work whenever. I end up working 10 to 6 anyway because that's the sanest schedule, and having midday interruptions disrupts the flow of my thoughts and focus. It's nice to not have to be at my desk when work is light, and I'm glad I can start late or leave early when I have other things. And I prefer choosing to work these hours than being expected to, because there isn't any expectation from others that I'll be tied to my desk at a certain point in the day. May I ask what you do? Computer science researcher. Inverse question, how does one acquire a 9 to 5? Local government. I just recently got a local government job, and one of the best parts is the schedule. Shoot, I took a government job and nobody worked 9 to 5. Had a supervisor work 5 to 1, and most co-workers were somewhere between 6 to 2 and 8 to 4. Dang early birds. That's why I love my local government job. I can come between 6:30 and 9, I can leave between 2 and 7, and at the end of my month I have to have worked the approximate hours I should have. I have some kind of worked hours bank account, no clue if there's a word for it in English. In German it's Gleitzeitkonto, Diebel says flexitime account, that has to stay somewhere between -15h and +15h, and I can use these hours to have a day off. Sure, not working or working less would be great, but I'm glad I have a job this accommodating with my education. And it pays decent. I had one of those and now I have a state one. The private sector is massively better IMO. What makes the private sector better than a state gig? I mean, the most obvious is the pay difference, but it seems difficult to get fired from a state gig. Usually good benefits, 401k match, and more free time versus the slog of the private world that just eats your soul more than a normal office job. I'm genuinely interested. Not going to lie, working in both sectors, finding the right government job makes all the difference. I do not regret it. Especially now with the current employment climate, the amount of job security a government employee offers and flexibility of schedule is something I'm grateful for. If I were still in the private sector, I have no idea what my current circumstances would be. Finding the right job, period, makes all the difference. Whether it's government or private, you have to enjoy your workplace, including coworkers, managers/supervisors, and the general environment. I went from a private sector gig that had all the micromanagement you could ever ask for, and it was awful. Switch to a local government job where I get a better schedule, 4 to 10s, get to decide what I want to work on and when, and where everybody treats each other well. Tech sales. Most companies will hire anyone masochistic enough to cold call all day, and you can make good money doing it. No violent felonies. Hired. Most companies will hire anyone masochistic enough to cold call all day. I'd rather take a bullet to the head than do that. Golden rule. It can be fun if you find the right sales org and buy into their culture of chronic, functional, alcoholism, excessive drug use, and terrible money management while earning $60K-$100K. Granted, the reason I chose those examples is that there is objectively no way to enjoy life as a cold calling telemarketer if you are not maintaining some sort of 24/7 baseline high from your substance of choice. I did it for a few months and have fond memories of that time, but for the sake of physical and mental health I'm very glad I wasn't on the floor for longer. I did it when I was in university to make some money. Was pretty good money, and it was for charities, so that made it feel a bit less bad. Still, was glad to put an end to that job after a few months of doing it. I used to work nights and weekends for years. I am now thoroughly enjoying my 9 to 5. The 9 to 5 has such a bad rep. But for those who have shitty hours, or worse no job at all, 9 to 5 is a lifesaver. I agree that the 9 to 5 has many pros, but I would be interested to see how different society would be if the norm was to work 4 10-hour days instead. I think it would greatly improve the environment, less commuting, improve family dynamics, more time to spend with family, improve health, more time to exercise/cook meals at home, and improve the economy, more time to shop, less money spent on childcare, less money spent on gas/car maintenance/transportation in general, and also improve productivity. Sounds awful. Let's just do 4 8-hour workdays instead for the same pay, of course. I work night shift 10 p.m. to 7:45 a.m., actually only 8 hours on calls. When you add the paid breaks it's still a 35-hour week. First week it's 4 days on then 2 days off, second week it's 4 days on and 4 days off, and it loops like this. The extended days off feels like a mini holiday. I actually think this type of work schedule is extremely good, but it's partly cause we work Friday and Saturday some nights, so obviously has a social impact. But if people did that for Thursday, Tuesday, Friday, I'm sure people would love it. It's actually really nice, and I always get parking, but because parking is more easily accessible I have noticed I'm not exercising enough since there's no walking involved going to work, and COVID-19's made it a bit worse. Pays nice though. I work at a place where most of the employees work 4 to 10s, and it isn't as glorious as you make it sound. First of all, you don't get more time to spend with family when you're still working 80 hours. You have the same amount of time, just shifted more towards your days off. If your spouse was working the exact same days as you, then sure, both of you get a 3-day weekend together, hooray. But the reality is you could be working on Thursday and they could be working Wednesday. Next, if you have children, those extra 2 hours a day usually mean you're missing out on home time with them unless you're doing overnights. If your spouse worked the same schedule, that means more time paying a babysitter/daycare/after school care while the kids are young, and less time for you to spend with them. While that may seem insignificant to someone without young kids, for those that do have them this is a serious detriment. With how early toddlers have to go to bed, for example, you might not have time to spend with them at all before bed. Right now my hours are 7:30 to 6 o'clock. When I get home, I'm tired. But I can't relax because I have chores and dinner and generally adulting to do before I can rest. There's only so many chores I can put off to my weekend. Dishes and meals and pet-related things cannot be put off. You don't gain anything from this schedule except one less commute. The time is just shifted elsewhere. Also, most people are not productive for an entire 8-hour shift, let alone 10. It works in my industry because our processes are very long and go on pretty much 24/7, and those who work 10-hour shifts tend to not be in front of a computer all day. The days where I am doing mostly computer work I tend to be less productive. As a programmer approaching midlife, I saw the writing on the wall. Kids coming out of college were raised with computers, had a better understanding of programming concepts, and it was hard for me to keep up and justify my higher salary. Don't get me wrong, I could still write great code and knew how to analyze a problem and design an efficient algorithm to address it, but writing code is not what it used to be now. It's more being able to assemble a bunch of different technologies/frameworks and get them to play together. So, I began looking into starting a business of my own. Spent a couple of years investigating potential business while continuing to work my day job. Somehow, not really certain how, I ended up deciding to open an ice cream store. And after more research, training, and planning, I did it. So now, I have a bunch of teens/20s people working for me, and I get to set the rules, hire the good people, no assholes is my rule, and make the decisions on how we operate. And I don't work 9 to 5 anymore. More like 8 a.m. to 11 p.m., 7 days a week, probably 300 days a year. But it's mine, and I love it. Went back to college. This has been a temporary fix, but it's at least given me a break from it. Finding a job where you work gigs rather than regularly also has helped. I've done all kinds of stuff from photography to childcare. I agree, cutting expenses helps a lot too. My car is 20 years old. I live in a small apartment. I could afford more, but I'd rather work less. Living on less changed everything for me. My happiness is worth way more than the salary cut I took to save my sanity. With you there, time and adventure, money and fancy things. I spent 3 years in a hospital working 6 to 6 with 28-hour on-call shifts every 3 days. I fall on my knees every day and thank God for my 9 to 5 current job. Yeah, I remember freezing my ass off spraying trees to ice them over for the winter. My hands and feet numb with cold, starving because I'd been working hard all day. Living on minimum wage, and hoping one of the other guys from the place would drop me off closer to town so I wouldn't have to walk as far. Just daydreaming of how nice any job would be where they pay you and you get to be warm. Frig, I was a picker when I was young too. That's not even minimum wage. The only person on my crew who probably made close to minimum was a Vietnamese refugee with a hustle that should embarrass the average Westerner. But like you said, you can do a lot of jobs that will make you think you hit the jackpot once you get into the 9 to 5 purgatory. Spraying trees to ice them over? Can you elaborate a bit, please? Their yard was a landscaping yard. At the end of the season they had a lot of evergreens ready to be planted, root balls bundled with burlap and wire. So you wait until temperatures are well below zero and you spray them with a hose and soak them down and keep going until they're iced up as well. I guess it helps stop them from windburn and getting dehydrated. The guy who ran the place had been in the biz for a long time, so I assume he knew best. I married a doctor. Now I am a stay-at-home dad of 2. Shit, why didn't I think of that? TaskRabbit. I don't know that it's viable in any city, but in a highly populated one I was making more a week than my office job. With that came absolutely no work benefits. With that also came complete autonomy and responsibility, which for me were worth it. Really. It sucks you have no benefits, but I'm glad to hear someone in a gig job was making as much as a typical salaried job, unless your salaried job paid you jack shit. I live in NYC, so my dollar doesn't go as far as others, but a typical week I can make $1,000. And that's with the time I need to have an otherwise balanced life. One week I decided to test it without any side gigs or social commitments and worked as hard as I could and make $2,000. There's TaskRabbits I've met that use the app differently than me and make almost 2x me, but TaskRabbit is literally their whole work life, whereas I'm only using TaskRabbit to pursue other creative careers. I guess the comforting thing is knowing how much I can make on the app and choosing not to. There's a nice sense of freedom there. Of course there's less than stellar experiences with certain tasks on the app, but no matter how stressful or hard a job is, above all else I know once I'm done I never have to see those people or places again, and that is huge personally for my mental health. LOL, me too. Was a consultant for an IT firm. They hired a dude, and then dropped him in my office day one, where I worked alone, and did not supervise him whatsoever. We were equals, and I have no interest in fucking with other people, but the guy was a piece of human garbage. Literally day one he tells me he is working for another company remotely, while getting paid full-time by our company. We were expanding quickly, but they hired him expecting a few contracts to be signed that never got signed, so basically in a month, he maybe had 20 hours work. He comes in 2 hours late every day, fucks around on his phone, and leaves hours early. I'm completely swamped, give him a few of my things here and there, and he just ignores it, until I get complaints from clients, and take care of it myself anyways. I had a surgery that required 2 weeks off, and he covered for me while I was gone. First day back, and he immediately tells me how he has retrained my clients, and don't open the door anymore, we only communicate by email. This place has about 50 employees who treat me like family. I seethe a bit, but try and get along. Next day I come in, and he is blaring EDM. I hear it from the hallway. Our office is next to the general manager, and accountant, basically the people that determine whether we have a contract or not. I walk in, and turn off the music, without saying anything, and he makes a big huffing sound, like I've offended him. This is something I discussed with him a couple dozen times previously. He turns to me and says, "Did you wake up on the wrong side of the bed today, you baby?" Then literally puts his hands to his eyes and does the mimicking crying thing. We get in a heated argument, in which I tell him my grievances with how he's been acting since day one, and how I have client complaints, and told the clients that those complaints need to go to my boss, not me. He storms out. Half an hour later, my boss calls me and wants an explanation of what happens. He repeats, "Did you say anything else?" several times, like he was looking for something specific for me to admit to. I still don't have a clue what he was trying to get me to say. I get written up after they talked to a few of our clients on that floor, when they said they could hear me in the argument. Fair enough. A week later, my boss tells me that the CEO asked if I buried the hatchet with asshole. I told him he hadn't come into work for the past week, and I hadn't talked to him. He told me they gave him permission to work from home, and he tells me I need to fix things. I email him and arrange to have a beer the following evening before a weekly gathering of tech people. He sits down and immediately starts insulting and berating me again, like I assumed he would, which is why I recorded it. He claimed that the CEO told him directly that if things didn't go well, I'd be fired, and then just started berating and insulting me. I walked out, and left. The next day I was fired. Since he had basically given me heads up, I had already pulled router logs, showing his constant connecting remotely to servers in the Cayman Islands. Douchebag had bragged to everyone about working in the Cayman Islands during our staff party a few months earlier, and that was the previous company he was working for. I also handed the recording of the entire conversation. My boss immediately erased the phone in front of me, for privacy reasons. I haven't mentioned this, but previously, my direct boss and I had a perfect relationship. He was even tearing up while he fired me. Douchebag kept working there for a couple weeks. The 50-person company was our primary client, but we had about 6 other smaller ones, all of which treated me like family. I visited each office to say goodbye, but unfortunately for him, he had already been there, and attempted to tell them some bullshit. He literally walked into a client that loved me, grinning and rubbing his hands together, and told them I was fired, and he would be taking over. They were super upset, and, after I provided the CEO, presidents, my bosses, and the head of IT consultants emailed them all and complained, asking to have me back. 4 other companies followed suit. They lost almost all of my clients. For a few $100,000 a year in contracts, I was paid $60,000 and massively overworked, and fired him a week or 2 later. The CEO was a blowhard, and I knew there was zero chance of him admitting he was fooled by this guy and giving me a call back. The company had fucked me over a bunch of times anyways, and were shit to work for, missed paying me about $3,000 in bonuses, and also shorted me about $500 on my final check. The new consultant called me for help a few times, and I laughed. He was a nice guy, so I explained that I'd like to help him, but had many grievances with the company. The problem now is, I have no opportunities for work, and little chance of acquiring anything with that kinda salary again, in the town I live in. So unfortunately, I probably have to start my own consulting company, and work way harder than I want for the next 5 or 10 years. It's alright though, if I can get as many contracts as I was handling before, my pay should increase 5-fold minimum. Just gotta wait for this COVID shit to end, and then find a way to get $10,000 together.